Welcome to No Nonsense Nonprofits. I'm Sandy Ray, founder of Sandra E. Ray CPA, where we alleviate financial headaches so that you can create a bigger impact. Today, we're going to talk about how record retention policies affect your tax exempt status. So let's start with what is a record retention policy. Simply, it's a document management system. It communicates what documents to keep and when and if to purge documents. So why do we need a record retention policy and how does that affect our tax exempt status? Well, according to the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits and their principles and practices for nonprofit excellence, the adoption of a document retention policy sets guidelines and facilitates directors' fulfillment of duties of care, establishes transparency, and ensures compliance. Now, this can affect your tax exempt status because we have to make sure that we are in compliance with IRS regulations. So going to the IRS way back in 2008, they added the question about, do you have a record retention policy to the Form 990? While this is not a requirement for your tax exempt status, the IRS and many other organizations and professionals feel like this is an important policy. It's a best practice to have this, to establish the policy and to follow it. The IRS has published Publication 4221 PC, which is compliance guideline for 501c3 public charities. And it states that a record retention policy should show how you're going to maintain your records and show compliance with your tax rules. It supports the information that you report on the 990. It helps you to evaluate the effectiveness of your programs. It helps you to monitor your budget. Obviously, it helps you to prepare financial reports, identify your sources of cash or non-cash resources, and comply with grant-making procedures. In addition to the IRS, back in 2002, after Enron, the federal government enacted the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And that made it a criminal liability if to alter, destroy, conceal, or falsify records, if the intent was to impede, obstruct, or influence a federal investigation or the administration of a federal matter. So it became criminal to destroy records that are important to the organization. So not only could you lose your tax exempt status if you don't have the right records, but there could be some criminal liability as well. So it's critical that you have a record retention policy to make it clear to everyone on the team what records to keep, what records can be purged or destroyed, and for how long you have to keep them. So that brings up the next question. What should we be keeping and for how long? I've kind of divided this next section of our talk into how long to keep things, and then we'll talk about each item within there. So I'm going to start with, you're going to keep things permanently. These are things you're never going to get rid of. And these are things like your organizational documents, your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, corporate resolutions, your IRS determination letter, your 1023 application. These are all organizational documents that you need to keep forever. Some governance documents that you also need to keep, minutes of all the meetings of the board or the annual meetings of the membership, any real estate deeds, mortgages, that kind of thing, insurance records, policies, and documents related to claims. Of course, you want to keep all your Form 990s and related state filings. Employment related documents that you're going to want to keep have to do with retirement and pension. Finances that you're going to keep permanently are your year-end financial reports, those audit reports if you have them. If not, your review, your compilation, or just your internal financial statements. You're going to want to keep disbursement copies for important purchases. And you're going to want to keep those depreciation schedules permanently. Some legal documents that you're going to want to keep permanently is anything legal related, legal correspondence, any deeds or mortgages, bill of sale for real estate or other major purchases. Patents, if you have any patents, you're going to keep that documentation permanently, or likewise, any trademarks or copyrights. The next section I want to talk about is things that you need to keep for 7 years. And we're going to be talking about a lot of accounting records fall into this category. So things that support the year-end financial statements, the 990 that you've compiled, those things need to be kept for 7 years after filing of those documents. Any expired contracts, mortgages, notes, and leases, you're going to want to keep those for 7 years because they support those financial statements and 990s, those kinds of things. Payroll records, W-2s, and time cards, those all need to be kept for 7 years. And then for any terminated employee files, those need to be kept for 7 years. So 7 years after the employee is terminated, then we can think about purging those records. The next group is the 3-year group. These are things you're going to keep for 3 years after the fiscal year end. And those are going to be things like your bank statements, any employment applications, any internal audit documents that you may have, or inventory records that you may have, like maybe you have a gift shop or you sell some things online, or even if you inventory office supplies or printing materials because you purchase so many of those. And the final category is our 2-year category. And those are things like your bank reconciliations and your general correspondence. You need to keep those for 2 years. So I want to let you know that I have a sample record retention policy that was developed by the AICPA, or the American Association of Independent CPAs. And if you would like a copy of that, it's basically 2 pages. There's a summary, and then there's the categories of the documents that we just discussed. Comment below and we will send you that Word document so that you can use it to develop your own record retention policy. Just some expert tips, tricks, things I've learned over the years with regards to record retention policies is, number one, this applies to your electronic documents as well as your paper documents, and this includes your email. So when we're talking about if we've got everything electronic, we want to make sure that it's backed up properly and that you've checked your restore process. That's my little sidebar into keeping your documents, the ones that need to be kept. But keep in mind that email is considered a document as well. So if you have some important emails, you may want to save a copy of them other than in your Outlook or Gmail, because those are things that need to be kept, could possibly permanently. The second thing I want to talk about is the uniqueness of your nonprofit organization. Yes, we are similar in many ways in the nonprofit industry, but every organization is different. It has its own unique signature, things that you do, and that includes the documents that you're going to need to keep. Things that retain the institutional memory or the history or the background of the organization. You're going to want to keep those, not just those things that I mentioned earlier regarding finances and legal types of things. Other things that you're going to want to keep is you may want to look into HIPAA. If you're keeping any type of medical records or have access to medical records, you have requirements in HIPAA regarding document retention and obviously privacy mostly, but document retention. And then you're going to need to research your own state's requirements. Every state has different requirements for different things. For example, if you're serving children, some states require that you keep the records on those children, not only through their age of majority or when they legally become an adult, but then after any statute of limitations has expired. This gives that minor child the opportunity to come back to the organization and say, hey, there was something going on here, and these kinds of rules protect those kids. So that's just an example of one type of state requirement that's unique and different from federal requirements. And then, of course, we've got things related to payroll taxes for your state and sales tax for your state. Now, a record retention policy isn't just a document that we type up, say, hey, this looks wonderful. It's a process, and we need to be following that process in order to comply with these regulations and rules and just good governance for our organizations. And so I want you to set up your filing system with this in mind. Maybe you store your documents electronically in these big folders or sections or wherever that where you say this is a permanent file, never to be destroyed, or these are documents that can be destroyed in 7 years. Or maybe you add something to a folder, it says purge on such and such a date. These are just little things to identify electronic documents or paper documents when they can be purged. It makes it a lot easier. You don't have to refer to the written record retention policy if that is built into your filing system. Maybe what you do with your filing system, especially an online filing system, is you set up some sort of security so that anybody who has access to it may not necessarily be able to edit or delete or move those documents. This puts a little bit of assurance in that you are able to retain those corporate documents, that nobody accidentally deletes them, especially if you don't have a paper backup, that those things are kept permanently. And believe me, over time and as people turn over, some things get lost in translation and people get confused and maybe do something accidentally that you wouldn't want to have happen. So you might want to talk to your IT people about setting up the proper security. And then finally, I recommend that you assign a team member who has the responsibility for making sure that the process happens. Maybe you pick somebody whose job it is once a year, sometime when they're least busy, to make sure that they announce that these are the types of documents that need to be destroyed. Everybody confirms that those were destroyed. You just put somebody in charge of the process. And I think that's very helpful too. Now, I highly recommend a record retention policy. It's so important to your organizations. So whether you don't have a policy and you want to start one, or you have one, maybe it's time to review it, and maybe you make no changes to it because they are basically don't need a whole lot of updating other than for the format that we keep our documents in. So look at those policies and remember that not only is this a data management system where you're managing your documents, but it's also part of your risk management and compliance systems. So it is critical to have this policy and this process in place. It's really more important than you think when you first say, okay, we're going to look at our record retention policy. I mean, that just sounds so easy, but it is very critical. This is the basis for many of these compliance and legal types of issues for your organization. Hopefully not issues, but keeping your organization safe and buttoned up and have this best practice in place. So I hope this was helpful. Now remember, managing documents can be overwhelming. A well-written record retention policy will communicate what's expected. Some new staff training may be required. As you bring people in, you need to remind them of what our policy is. And if you have any other questions on this topic or other topics, please put that in the comment section below. And remember, we always appreciate your likes. Thank you for joining me today. And remember, creating a bigger impact starts with stopping the nonsense. If you're dealing with nonsense in your nonprofit organization, we'd love to help you cut through the noise.